So I know I've done videos on $100 video setups using a web camera and a microphone just to help you get started. But what if you still want a camera? Then today I'm going to be talking about how to take a very budget-friendly camera that is a DSLR camera. It's less than $300, and we're going to be talking about how to get a great shot just like this, even on a budget camera. So if you want to know how to get the settings right, how to get great image quality, stick around. We're going to be talking about it coming up next. Hey, what is up, guys? It's Diana here with Women TV, helping transition your passion into the business that you love. And on this channel, I do small business development tips, whether that's something around how to structure and start your business or financial tips, as well as video marketing tips like we're going to be talking about today. So if that's something up your alley, definitely consider subscribing. So it's no question that on this channel, a passion of mine is technology. And one of the things that I love about having my own home-based business is the fact that I need things, and needing things requires me to figure out what is going to work best for my workflow, what's going to work best for the systems and the tools that I need. And then also I get a chance to test out other things like the camera we're going to be talking about today for you guys that will help you figure out, if you're just getting started, if you haven't made any money in your business and you really are, pinching pennies, then you already need the real systems and tools and software to get started. But then you also still need some gear along the way. And you can really start with your smartphone. I know you probably have heard that 100 times by now if you're looking at a video like this. But one of the things is that you really can, I just don't prefer to. I like to use my phone for other things like what it's built for, not per se for the camera. But if you really want to move from that and get a camera, then this one is just a really budget-friendly, easy to use kind of camera. Now, just to give you a heads up, usually or lately I've been trying to keep the videos very short, maybe 10 minutes or less. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stick to that today because we're going to be covering a lot of content. I mean, really diving deep. So if you have a camera or if you're going to be picking one up soon, then you want to take some notes, write down the specific settings that I'm going to be talking about, and even possibly revisit the video. I'm going to be dropping the time codes down below just to kind of help you skip ahead if you need to get to any specific parts. But this may be a more of a training video and tutorial, so it's going to be a little bit longer. But let's go ahead and jump into the camera. Even if you have less than $300, you want a dedicated camera specifically for recording your content, and it's pretty decent. Let's jump over into the settings. Again, I'm going to be walking you through explaining some different things along the way. And some of it may be a little technical, may go over your head a little bit if you're not familiar to the camera world and some of the settings and things like that, but I'll try to make it as simple and easy to understand and not as clear as mud. So let's jump over and into the camera. Okay, so once you have your camera in the on position, I'm going to be using this new book that I'm going to be reading, which is Soar by T.D. Jakes, as my focus point. Now, let's talk about focus for a minute. Now, not all Canon cameras are created equally. So not all of them have dual pixel autofocus. So once you decide on what autofocus setting that you're going to use, and the way you're able to decide is you hit that Q or that quick menu button, and you can also hit right there in the center. That'll get you to the same place. You can use the autofocus method, which will do face tracking and things like that. The flex zone or flexi zone, where you can select the area of focus, and then single auto point focus, which is specifically pinpoint one area and tell the camera to only focus on that. So what each of those look like, so we just saw what that one looks like. You would have a larger box there, and as you can see, it's doing a little bit of hunting as we reselect certain areas, but it'll generally just stay focused on that particular area. And then if you go to the single point, then it will stay specifically on that point no matter what comes in or outside that box. It'll do the same there, and it'll do the same there. So what we want is for it to stay on his face, and that's some of the different autofocus. You can also do manual focus, where you are on the front of the lens here. You can adjust it and turn that off. Excuse me, actually hit that button. But so now you can see up here where it says manual focus, and it switched from AF to MF, and I will have to twist the focus ring, and it'll go from blurry to clear, and you'll have to try to figure out what's the clearest. And then up here you can hit this top button to magnify and to zoom in, and then you can easily see, now you know he's in focus if you're going to do manual focus, and then come back out and you're ready to record if that's going to work okay for you. As far as magnification is concerned, you can zoom in, punch in a little bit more. You know, you can go from blurry to extremely clear and figure out what's that great point. So right there, I know it's completely in focus. We can even see the pores and his mustache hairs and all that goodness. So that's how you know if you want to do that and magnify and all that good stuff. And so you know for a fact you're going to be in focus. So that's that. So let's jump to the next point. Now, if you come down here, you have the shutter speed, the aperture, or what's known as the f-stop, as well as the ISO. When you're deciding if you're going to record in, let's say, 24 frames per second, typically you'll see movies recorded in that frame rate. 30 frames per second is typically what you will see like in TV or something like that. 24 is typically what's used, so we'll stick with that. When you're dealing with shutter speed, the way you know what number to make that is based off of what frame rate that you're going to use. So we're using 24 frames per second. We want to double that, and would be 48. But if we select that, the best I can do is get to 50. Because if I go up, it'll also go to 60. And if I go down, it'll go to 40. So right now, 50 is the best I can do to stick to that rule, which will deal with motion blur. Not going to get real deep into that. But just know that whatever number you pick here, so if it's 24, just double that, which will be 48. 50 is the best you can do. You want to do 30, make that 60. If you want to do 60, if you're trying to do slow motion, 60 frames per second, then you want to do 120, or the closest that we would be able to get is 125. So it will go there. Now that makes the image dark. So what the exposure triangle deals with, again, is how well this image looks overall. So let's say we're going to do 60 frames per second, which this camera does 720p at 60 frames per second. Then that means I want to go to my next setting, because these have to be in order. Like, I can't really adjust that too much. I possibly could, but the reason why I want to do 60 frames per second instead of maybe 24 frames per second is because it's going to give me less motion blur. I'm not going to get too deep in that, but just know that that's the way it is. If I wanted to do a slow motion shot, then I want to bring that down as much as possible, because the lower the aperture is, the brighter the image is. The larger you make that number, the darker that gets. And that deals with opening and closing more or less the iris, or the eye, in my opinion, what I like to call it, the eye of the lens, so that it can see. And then you go to ISO. What ISO is basically artificial light. And if I make this number bigger, I'm adding more artificial light. The lower I make that number, it's going to be less artificial light. So if I had to, then I can bring it to about there, and it should get me close. How do I know if I'm spot on or not? Is this little exposure meter right here. And it's a little technical, I get it, but again, this is just to kind of give you a quick overview as best as possible. Now, what you can see here is this little tick mark. This is the center. It's right at 0, just like a number line. The lower I go, the darker it is. The higher that is, based off of this overall image, it's going to tell me it's too bright, or it's too dark, or it's just about spot on, according to the camera's thought process, more or less. So it's saying it's going to be too bright when you start recording. So I can bring that down some. And then now, all I'm doing is touching the shutter button to make that come back up. Saying, well, you're getting closer, but about right there is kind of where we want. I typically like to record a little bit brighter than what the camera suggests, but that's my personal preference, because as you can see, it's starting to get darker, and now it's saying that's where you need to be. So let's just do a quick test recording just to see what that would look like as far as the brightness. And then even in recording, so that's, if we were going to do slow motion, that's what the camera is saying is good. I would prefer to brighten that up some. It's a little too bright, to something about right there. And that's 1600 ISO. So typically, if I was going to do at a higher frame rate with this particular camera, with the lighting that I have in the room, that's where I would be at. If I want to drop back down to 24 frames per second, my rule says I need to be double whatever that number is, so that puts me back at 50. The lower my shutter speed is, the brighter that's going to get. So I want to keep, let's say, a semi-blurry background as much as possible. So leave that at 4.0. ISO, start to bring down that artificial light to get it about normal. Camera stand, I'm still a little too bright, but let's see what that looks like. So again, the shutter speed is going to stay at 50. 4.0 is where I am at with the aperture or the f-stop, and the artificial light or the ISO is at 400, and that's what this looks like right now. It may say, the camera may say that that's too bright, but if I wanted to bring it down and say, okay, bring it down to 200, camera saying that's just almost there, that's darker. And then if I bring it down again, then the camera is telling me that I'm too dark now. So got to find that happy medium. I would prefer to be a little bit brighter, not too bright, but a little bit brighter for my particular preference than maybe what the camera suggests, but my personal preference. The more you add of either the aperture or the f-stop or the ISO will determine, you know, if you can compensate for brighter or darker images. This gets super confusing, just if you're not familiar with any of this stuff. But once you set the frames per second, you know, whether you want it to be more cinematic or TV-like, then once you do that 180 rule, then this kind of gets X'd out, and I don't really want to touch that anymore. The only other two things that I want to figure out to make the image brighter or darker is the aperture or the f-stop and the artificial light or ISO. Once I've gotten this as low, let's say I want to try to get a blurry background as much as possible, then I want to bring that down as much as possible. That's as low as that can go with the focal length that I'm at, the lens with this zoom range right now. The ISO can afford to go a little bit higher to brighten that image up. Not too bright, but maybe just a smidgen more. The camera's saying that's too high, but let's see. So that's what the image would look like if it was 24 frames per second, 50 for the shutter speed, 4.0 for the aperture or the f-stop, and for an ISO of 400. Another thing to consider when you are setting up your camera is whether or not it has that yellow hue to it, or if whites really look like the regular colors that it should, and that's dealing with the white balance. So all I did was go back to the quick menu. Now it's in AWB, which is the auto white balance. You have other options here, like for outdoor scenes, daylight is typically a bluer light, so that's adjusting for that. For shots in the shade, it has a bunch of different settings and stuff like that. Tungsten lights are typically yellow, so the camera would try to compensate by making this bluer to match. I already have daylight lights in my office, so that's not going to work for me. White fluorescent lights, if you have those, flash, photography, and as you can see, it changed it to make it more yellow there. Or I can do a custom white balance. So let's go ahead and set up, if we wanted to do a custom white balance setting to try to adjust for making the whites look white, yellows look yellow, and so forth and stuff like that. So this, what you will see, is a gray card. It has, you know, gray on one side and white on the other side. These are also used for setting proper exposure and all kinds of different stuff. But people typically use the gray side instead of the white side. You can use either or, you can even use a white piece of paper, but I basically want to fill the frame, take a picture. So once I've taken the picture of something that is truly white, so the camera can identify what should it adjust white colors to look like, I want to go into the menu settings, and on this second level here, I want to go down to custom white balance, and I have an image that is what we just took a picture of, and I want to set and use that as the custom white balance. And then I hit the shutter button and go back to what I need to there. So I want to get off auto white balance and adjust it for that image, and boom. So there we have our custom white balance. Now the white balance in this room is pretty good simply because I have all of the same lights, all the light bulbs, the softbox light, everything is going to be the same daylight temperature lighting. So whites typically look like white regardless in this room, unless I do something funky on the camera or adjust things after the fact. So let's see what this looks like with the real person in it being me. Okay, so this is an example of what this shot looks like. I've switched from doing a manual focus like we did with the book just to do regular autofocus that this camera has, which again, I believe is hybrid autofocus. If not, then I will fix, or even just list it right here at the bottom of the screen so you can see what that actually is. But this is what it looks like. This is what the camera sounds like. I'm using the Purple Panda lapel microphone as always, hooked into the camera. Now, one thing about the Canon DSLR line, the mirrorless, even the M3, as old as it is has better preamps than this camera right here. You may hear a little bit of a noise floor, like let's just say, for example, you'll hear maybe some ambient noises. I've turned the air conditioner off so you aren't picking that up, but just normal noises, even like from, you know, the lamps outside or whatever. So let's just see what that sounds like. So that's typically what it sounds like, but that's the kind of sound that you'll get. It's not going to be the absolute best, but it'll be fairly decent, and it's enough to really get you started. Now, how do I know that I'm in the frame? So I'm doing a little bit of a camera inception. So I have my flip out screen for the camera facing me, pointed at the back of this one so I can exactly see what it is that I'm recording, and just to make sure that I'm in the frame. Whether or not it loses focus or not, it's not something that I can really control. I could have done manual focus, I just didn't feel like it. And that's one of the choices that you have when you're recording content, is to decide, do I want to take a chance with autofocus if it's not that great, or do I want to sit, you know, a couple books up, or, you know, a stool or something, and set a book that has a face on it like the book we were using, and adjust for that, replace the book with myself, and then know that I'm in focus. So it's so many different components that can go into using a camera like this. Again, you can use a mirror to sit behind it, take a picture to know where you were sitting. Is that going to work? Where was your head cut off? Was your arm cut off, or things like that? It gets to be a little bit more tedious, but there are other workarounds. Whether you are using a monitor, like just your regular computer monitor, or even a TV, hook it in with an HDMI cord or something like that, and then you can have a monitor for your screen. It makes you take extra steps when you're buying cheaper camera equipment, but it does not mean by any chance that your content has to be terrible, that, you know, you're not able to get great footage. I use that Canon T5i, which is very similar to this one, very similar settings and things like that. But at the same time, when I first got started, it was an amazing camera, and so is this for $260. So for $260, you can get a great looking camera, great looking footage just like this. And the more and more you use the camera, the more comfortable you become with the camera, no matter what kind of limitations that it may have. And every single camera has one, so don't feel bad if it doesn't have 4K light. We had, you know, footage that was 720p, 60 frames per second. It'll look fine as long as you have lighting. And I think that's one of the biggest components that most people don't pay attention to, is that when you are trying to be in a super dark environment and you're already lowering the resolution or how clear the image can look, then it can tend to look crappy. But the first HD's videos were in 720p, and then you had 1080p, and now we're getting into 4K and so forth and things like that. But here's an example footage of it. I hope this video was able to help you out in getting better, higher quality footage. And if there is something that I could recommend to you, if you really do have, you know, maybe less than $300, but you want a solid and good camera, the Canon SL1 will get you by, but at the same time, there's a better option that is $30 cheaper, which is the Canon M3. Get a mirrorless camera that has Wi-Fi. You are able to use your app. So if you are sitting like this and you want to start and stop recordings, you can use that Canon Connect app on your phone to be able to record, to take pictures, and all kinds of stuff. So it's a step up, and right now, and that's used just for the body of the camera only, it's $230. And you have great audio preamps. So unlike this one, it's more static noise. It's a higher noise floor, so to speak, which means you'll hear that kind of noise in the background. You really don't pick any of that up, even on the Canon M3, which was fantastic, as well as the Canon M6, and you can really get by with some fantastic images and just all kinds of stuff. So really, really great stuff. If you enjoyed the video, if it was helpful to you, just in maybe understanding some of the camera settings better, or if you're finally able to put all the little pieces that you may find on the internet into one succinct video and helps you get video footage like this, drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Maybe if there's something that you wanted to know more about that I didn't explain that I could possibly do another video on. So drop it down below. But as always, my friends, live with passion, and I'll see you guys in the next video.